All right, folks. Well, good afternoon and welcome to another Kansas Association of Counties video presentation. It's great to see all of you folks. We're over 300 people, I believe, that are going to be on with us today. So this is a fantastic showing, and we certainly do appreciate you spending some of your day with us. Good afternoon. My name is Bruce Clydney, and I'm the Executive Director for the Kansas Association, and it's a pleasure to have all of you joining us today. So we've got a very, very interesting, obviously, and important topic to discuss this afternoon. And let me encourage you all to please make sure you keep your presentation or your computers muted throughout the whole presentation. That way we don't interrupt all the other listeners. So with that, let's get started. The Governor's Office of Recovery is tasked with the distribution and administration of funds provided to the state of Kansas through the Federal CARES Act. Today, staff from the Office of Recovery are joining us to discuss the $400 million Round 1 funding appropriated to all 105 Kansas counties. During this webinar, they will review a template resolution required to be passed by the county commissions to receive the funds, and they will provide more information on reconciliation and recoupment timelines and present a county-level toolkit with resources for fund management. This toolkit will include spreadsheets for tracking reimbursements, information on eligible and ineligible expenditures, templates to aid in the development of a county direct aid plan, plus a whole lot more. And let me tell you, folks, Jay Hall here in the office and I had an opportunity to visit with these great folks over at the Office of Recovery, and they have been working very diligently to put this program together, and it's very impressive what they have come up with. So I'm excited to roll it out to you all today and see where this takes us, because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Kansas and all of our Kansas counties. So also, following this week's webinar, the Office of Recovery will host weekly webinars with the Kansas Association of Counties to provide updates and answer questions regarding this program and the CARES Act funding. So as far as questions are concerned for today, please type them into your chat box if you have them as you come up with them, and we will capture them in the chat box. And if they are longer than the fit into the chat box, and or you think of it after the meeting, go ahead and type it into an email and send them to either myself here at the office or Jay Hall here at the office. So we'd be happy to get them over to the Jay and Company. So with that, I don't want to take up any more of our valuable, precious time. We are joined today, like I said, staff from the Recovery Office, and Shelby Conkle. So please take it away for us.
Hi all, thanks Bruce. My name is Shelby Conkle, and I'm the Lieutenant Governor's Chief of Staff, and I have been assigned on an interim basis over to the Recovery Office. And I have joined with me today Taylor Hawkins, who's also on an interim basis in the Recovery Office from the Governor's team, and Vijay Ramasamy from our policy team. So we'll walk through the toolkit today and give a brief overview. As a kind of round of, I just saw something in the chat that I am hard to hear. Is that a little bit easier? Can you hear me now?
That sounds good.
Okay. I will try to talk loudly. If you have any problems hearing me, let me know. As just a kind of a quick overview, some of you may have saw that yesterday the State Finance Council approved a Recovery Office budget. So they will be onboarding staff quickly here in the next few weeks. And that will allow for a lot more technical assistance and a lot more guidance, interpretation, and more direct support, both via these sorts of webinars, but also some other tools that you'll see here in the toolkit that we'll begin deploying over the next couple of weeks. Just as a quick overview, we'll go through a couple of the things that are here. We'll talk very briefly about some background information about the Office of the Recovery, give you an overview of the resources and the tools that are included in this toolkit, talk about the SPARK committee and executive committee, the funding allocations per county, processes and timelines, state and county priorities. And in this section, we'll kind of give an overview of how counties that might be struggling with how they would invest this money can use kind of a template, and then go through some of the federal guidance and interpretations at the state level. And so Vijay, if you go to the next slide. But before we get into too much of that, I just wanted to thank everyone on the phone. I know that we have quite a few public health officials, county emergency managers, and county commissioners, and others who have had to make several very tough decisions in the past 4 months, and then no one quite expected to ever be in this situation, which was truly unprecedented. And as a result, the federal government provided the money via the KARES Act, which is an unprecedented investment in the state. But there's some unique challenges that brought with it. We received a significant amount of funding, but a limited amount of guidance. And we've been tasked with spending that money in a very, very short period of time. And so that presents some unique challenges, but also some unique opportunities. And so we kind of wanted to make, tell you all that we really just appreciate your patience as we work to kind of answer and address some of the questions and concerns that you all have raised, either directly to our office or to the Association of Counties. We have worked with Jay and Bruce, as he mentioned. We provided an overview of this template earlier today and incorporated their feedback. We've also been working to address some of the questions that you all have submitted to them previously. If they're not addressed today, we will be issuing kind of an FAQ and sometime early next week that goes over some more additional questions and some kind of covers some of those answers. So you can kind of see here what our goals are, what we would like to do. We really want to make this a partnership. We would like to be able to be a resource as you all start investing this money, and would like to provide you with as much assistance as possible. And to do that, we want to be as efficient as possible. So we're trying to streamline our processes here, lay them out from the very beginning, and provide the resources and tools that you all will need to invest this money, and then provide kind of ongoing and constant communication, and then additionally provide guidance interpretation. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes, but one of the things that we're really struggling with is we've received kind of constantly evolving and limited amounts of guidance. I think the most recent document came earlier this week and had, I think it was like 11 pages worth of guidance. And so we really want to make sure that we are approaching this in a thoughtful way, and that we have answers to as many questions from that guidance as possible. And so I think you'll see that what we lay out here today is the first step in starting to answer some of those questions. But we know that after today, there will probably be maybe even more questions, and we've got a process for addressing those. And so I just really appreciate and look forward to being your partners in this process. So with that, I will turn it over to Vijay, who will kind of talk about some of the things that we've got in this toolkit.
Perfect. Thank you, Shelby. I hope everyone can hear me. We're going to start with an overview of the different resources that we're going to provide you and why we've provided you this toolkit. I want to say on the outset that I know that we're scheduled for an hour, but we kind of fully expect this to go a little bit longer than that. So thank you all for your patience, because we have a lot of information packed into this presentation. I know there'll be additional questions after this presentation as well. So this toolkit specifically is a way for counties to understand the reporting processes and timeline as it relates to round one funding. We want to be very clear from the outset what our expectations are in terms of reporting, and provide you all the templates and the tools that you need to get that to us in a uniform way. I will note that this toolkit is specific, and this presentation today are going to be very specific to reimbursements and making sure that there is a way and a process for tracking all of the expenditures that you all have already incurred due to COVID-19 so far, and that there's a whole nother beast in terms of creating a direct spending plan for all of the funds that you have left over after subtracting your reimbursements. We will, in the coming weeks, provide you additional information, resources, investment ideas, all of those important pieces of information needed to develop those direct spending plans, which are due on August 15th. But today is really going to be focused on the first thing that we'd like everybody, all the counties to focus on, which is getting all of the reimbursements together, not only at the county level, but also for cities, for public schools, and other specific public institutions within your county. I want to start with what are the different types of contacts and resources. So we'll go through a few things here, and I'm actually going to go to the specific page on the covid.kas.gov website that you can go to after this webinar to have a full list of everything that we presented for you today. As Shelby mentioned earlier, we've gotten brief guidance from the federal government as it relates to the CARES Act. And that is the exact same guidance that is available on the website. So any guidance that we have, we are going to in turn provide to you so that everything is uniform. So what I'm going to do first is go to the covid.kas.gov website, which we'll send the link out right after this webinar. So all of you can see specifically what we're providing. First, there's going to be a submission portal on this website where you can submit 3 different types of things. One is you can submit all of the reports that are due to the Office of Recovery. So you can submit the reimbursement forms, the direct spending plan. Second thing is you can submit your county level resolution. And then the final thing, which Shelby will go through in a second, is you can submit what we're calling a guidance interpretation request. That is any sort of expenditure that is a gray area for your county in terms of, is this eligible under the CARES Act or not? So you can fill out the form that Shelby will go through in a second and submit it to the submission portal here. And we will review that with our legal team, make a determination, and post all of those determinations on our website so that it is very clear to all counties what is allowed and what is not allowed in terms of expenditures. This can be anything from, hey, the federal guidance says this, is my expenditure an example of that, to, hey, the federal guidance doesn't include this, but I think that this could be COVID-19 related. You can fill out one of these forms, submit it on the submission portal, and then you'll be able to get a determination from our legal team. The other things that are associated with this website are all the updated guidance from the Treasury, any general federal guidance we get, which is also reproduced in the toolkit, and then a form that our Department of Administration put out in terms of federal audit requirements, basically laying out what is usually required in a federal audit and giving you additional information of when the state is then audited, what are the sorts of information that the federal government is going to be asking of us. So I'm going to go back to the presentation here. So that link is produced here, and you will be able to access that right after this webinar and also be able to access the municipality toolkit. What I'm going to do right now is switch it over to Shelby, who's going to explain the guidance interpretation process.
Great. Hopefully you all can hear me a little bit better now. The guidance interpretation process is designed to provide, perfect, great, thanks Nelson, is designed to answer some of the more complex questions that you all have as it relates to the guidance that has been provided by the federal government. This would come in from you all. Our legal team would review it. As Vijay mentioned, we would publish those online. And this really kind of acts as an insurance policy so that both we can justify why or how we got to a decision, what would be a permissible expenditure, because there would be so much gray area. But also it is beneficial, we thought, to you all, because you all would have a way to make sure that we were providing you with very clear, very specific guidance or rulings or interpretations to make these decisions. This is very similar to the coding system, or I'm sorry, the coding process in municipal and county governments. So you all, if you think of it, very similar to that. This form is a fillable form online, and as Vijay mentioned, you would just upload it to the website. We would have a goal of getting these back in roughly a week, but we know that at the very beginning of this, we might have a larger influx, and so we ask for a little bit of patience as we work through these. I just saw a question about who would the forms be submitted to in the chat. We would have these submitted to the online portal. So there will be one central point for you for all of the reporting and submission items, and we'll show you that here in a bit, but that is where you would upload this specific form. So I think that if there aren't any other questions, I'll turn it back over to Vijay.
Thanks, Shelby. So one thing that I want to underscore before we go on to the next slide here is that the specific forms that, again, I want to underscore for this presentation will be going through a uniform reimbursement and expenditure form that you all will be able to fill out for the August 15th deadline with all of the reimbursement requests that you have from the beginning of March 1st, or when the guidance says that expenditures are allowed. And that we will be providing to you early next week, just so we can confirm that it complies with all of the federal guidance that we have so far. But later on in the presentation, Taylor will be going through that form, so you guys have a preview of what that form looks like. And then you'll get that next week, and you'll be able to start filling it out with both your expenditures and expenditures from cities and schools within your jurisdiction. Finally, I want to talk about, again, what to expect next. This specific webinar, like I mentioned, is focused on reporting and reimbursement. I know there's a lot of questions about spending plans and what do I do in terms of submitting a direct aid plan. We will provide a template, a uniform template for all counties for a direct aid spending plan the week of July 6th. This presentation will briefly go through some of the ideas that we want counties to start thinking about and some of the steps that we want counties to take to start developing that spending plan. But we will provide a specific template for all counties on the week of July 6th. There was a question submitted to KAC specifically related to what happens after I submit that direct aid template. What will happen is you will submit that direct aid plan template. Then our office and the Spark Committee will review that plan specifically to ensure that all of the expenditures within that plan are eligible expenditures, and to do a cursory review and data collection of what all the counties are spending their direct aid dollars on. And then we will provide you a determination saying everything looks like it is a eligible expenditure. You are okay to start spending on whatever programs that you've outlined. As Bruce mentioned, we will continue to have webinars. The next webinar will be the week of July 6th. Additionally, we will have a specific webinar for whoever counties designate as their point of contact for financial reporting. We'd like all counties to determine a point of contact, and Taylor will get into that a little bit later. But we'll have a specific webinar just to go over all of the reimbursement and reporting deadlines and forms in more detail, so you all have a place to ask very specific questions about that, because we'll just be doing a brief overview. The last piece that I'll talk about here is that in the coming weeks, we will have webinars from state agencies or other groups explaining specific program ideas that you could invest in, that you could put into your direct spending plan. So for example, if you'd like to do some sort of childcare program, we will have our executive director of the Children's Cabinet, for example, come on and give examples of childcare programs that you can implement at the county level, basically just creating a structure and ensuring that you all have the resources you need to build the programs within the truncated timeline that we do have. Next, we'll go through specifically the relationship between the Recovery Office, the Spark Committee, the governor, and the State Finance Council. I think there's been a lot of developments on this front in the past couple of months, and we want to just lay it out here so everybody's on the same page in terms of what are the different roles. So the Spark committee was established by the governor to include both legislators, our legislative leaders, our business leaders, our community leaders in one centralized committee to advise on CARES Act related spending, develop investment proposals, create priorities, and really plan out over the next couple of months and beyond, how do we meet the health needs of today and tomorrow, but also address the real economic challenges that the state has. So that is really the mission of the Spark committee. Here's what the process looks like. So the steering committee is what advises on policy priorities and develops investment proposals. Think of that as kind of the engine of ideas for all of the related investments that the Spark committee is going to be making. The executive committee, which is made up of 5 people, will review those ideas from the steering committee and approve investments and also advise on reporting structures and distribution structures. I know many of you have tuned into both the executive committee and a joint committee from the executive and steering committee to really understand what types of work that those committees are doing. They are really trying to understand and develop priorities for the state and develop investment solutions. Those investment solutions, similar to the round 1 funding that we're talking about today, will then go to the governor. The governor will provide her feedback on those proposals, similar to what she did for round 1. And then she will then advance those by statute to the State Finance Council. And I want to be very clear here that any specific change that we make, whether it be to specific policy associated with the CARES Act, to the specific budget of the Recovery Office that was approved a few days ago, to any investment proposals, all have to go through the State Finance Council. So there is a built-in process, and a clear example of that can be that originally we had a deadline that was in September for the direct aid spending plan, but after discussion in the State Finance Council, that was moved up to August. And so I want to be very clear that any sorts of major changes, investments, all have to go through this process. I know many of you are thinking, so what is the role of the Recovery Office? I would think of the Recovery Office as the implementation arm for all of this. So the Recovery Office will be the group that provides research support to the Spark Committee, implements the programs that the State Finance Council, Spark, and the governor develop, and manages the reporting and compliance for all of the expenditures done at both the county level, collecting those, but also for round 2 and round 3 funding. Very quickly, here is an overview of the Spark Executive Committee, and then here is an overview of the Spark Steering Committee. I won't go through these specifically, but I just want to point out that these folks are from across the state and go through and represent various parts that keep our state going, including our business community, community groups and nonprofits, and our state legislator and other political leaders. So we tried to have a broad cross-section of the state illustrated in the Spark Committee, and I think they've done a really good job so far of providing the direction for the Recovery Office and the state, and we're excited to continue to work with them. Next, we'll be talking specifically about funding allocation. So I'm going to talk very specifically about round 1 funding and the CARES Act in general. So it's very clear. I know we had a lot of questions about what is round 1 versus round 2 and round 3, so we'll get into that here. Before we get into the CARES Act specifically and round 1 funding, I just wanted to provide a broad overview of what the federal government passed. The CARES Act itself includes funds for a whole host of things, not just the $1.25 billion that the governor's office was provided and that Johnson and Sedgwick County were provided funds from. So it includes specifically funds for highly impacted sectors like hospitals. It includes the Paycheck Protection Program, which many of you have heard of. It includes tax breaks, unemployment benefits, and grants for small businesses and large businesses. The specific fund that this round one allocation comes from is called the Coronavirus Relief Fund. That fund, and we'll get into it very specifically on the next slide, was provided to governor's offices. And in the state of Kansas, through statute, we created this relationship in which any expenditures that are made through the Coronavirus Relief Fund have to be approved by the State Finance Council, as we talked about. So throughout the next couple of months, you may hear that Department of Commerce is spending a lot of money on their community development block grant program, or you might hear that Department of Children and Families is spending lots of money on their child care programs. All of those may be part of the CARES Act as direct grants to those agencies, but they don't necessarily come from the Coronavirus Relief Fund that the SPARK Committee, the Recovery Office, and then the State Finance Council is providing input, advice, and approval on. Like I said, the Coronavirus Relief Fund is a $1.25 billion allocation to the state of Kansas. There are two parts to it. One is a direct allocation to Johnson and Sedgwick County for their portions of the fund. And next is $1.3 billion provided specifically to the governor's office for providing to both the rest of the counties in the state and to make additional investments. We'll go through the round one distribution in a second, but what the SPARK Committee and was then approved by the governor and then the State Finance Council was a round one allocation of $400 million to ensure that every county in the state is getting funding, not just Johnson and Sedgwick County. So I'll go through it in the next slide here. But what we did, and we used the tenets of being fair, timely, and impactful, is we said, Johnson and Sedgwick County got $194 per person. That's how their funding was designated from the federal government. So we're just going to make sure that every county in the state is getting $194 per person. So no matter where you live, because everybody is a taxpayer, you will get $194 per person. Additionally, we allocated $50 million based on COVID impact. So both based on the impact of COVID-19 in terms of disease spread, but also the impact of COVID-19 in terms of unemployment. And that's where we get to impactful. We want to make sure that it's not just based on population, but also the disparate impact of COVID-19 in terms of economic impact and health impact that the disease has had throughout the state. So not every county in the state will be getting $194. In fact, all counties in the state will be getting more than $194 when you take into account the $50 million associated with impact aid. And the next slide here illustrates that very clearly. Ford County, for example, that had a large number of cases is actually getting $330 per person. Sedgwick County, which had a large unemployment rate, is getting that $194 from the federal government, but also money from that COVID impact fund to give them additional funds for the impact that COVID-19 has had on their economy and on the health of their residents. So all counties across the state will be getting some additional funds through that impact fund. Phases 2 and 3, rounds 2 and 3, as you may have heard them be referred to, are going to be determined in the coming month and months through the SPARK Committee. Those will be granted out to both public and private entities through a grant application process or provided as through programs at the state level, through our agencies, for example, creating a small business program. But we are still working through the distribution structure. But I wanted to just say here on the outset that both public and private entities will have access to the $600 million in remaining money when you subtract the $400 that's associated with round 1. We will be providing more information in the coming weeks and months on how public and private entities can apply for those funds and what specific structures and programs we're going to use to distribute those additional funding sources. Next, I want to talk specifically about a question that we've gotten over and over again about the differences between reimbursement and direct aid. I want to call out that earlier versions of this presentation and earlier presentations made to the State Finance Council or the SPARK Committee specifically referred to 50% allocated for reimbursement and 50% allocated for direct aid. I want to be very clear that the Spark Committee decided, and it was approved by the State Finance Council, that we are not doing and requiring 50% for reimbursement and not requiring 50% for direct aid. I'll give a very specific example. Let's say a county received $1 million from the state. If they only have $100,000 worth of reimbursements after they collect their reimbursements, both from their county and from cities within their county, that's only 10%. They can spend the other $900,000 on direct aid, which is any sorts of spending that are within the jurisdiction of the CARES Act. What they will have to do for that $900,000 is then submit that direct aid spending plan on August 15th that we talked about earlier. And we will, again, provide that template on the week of July 6th so that you have that template. So unless the only instances in which you will have to return funds to the state by the recoupment date on September 15th is if there are any funds that you have that are not reimbursed and not designated in your direct aid spending plan. So let's say you spent $100,000 on reimbursement and only $800,000 on your direct aid spending plan, and there's $100,000 floating out there, that will have to be provided back to the state. Additionally, if you send us your direct aid spending plan and $300,000 of it is actually ineligible expenditures, unless they're reclassified as eligible expenditures, they'll have to be provided back to the state on September 15th.
Why can't I hear it?
The benefits of this approach is it allows you all to both get reimbursements for expenditures that you've already made, but also have funds to make further investments in any sorts of programs, any sorts of equipment, anything that you need to purchase. So it gives you that flexibility, and you don't have to front the cost for everything that you want to spend money on. So I want to be very clear about that. So the next portion of this is specifically related to the process and timeline as it relates to reimbursements and expenditures. And what I'm going to do is turn it over to Taylor Hawkins, who has been leading this effort. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. She will share her screen, and we will go through all of the specific pieces related to reporting and reconciliation.
Okay, give me 1 second here. There we go. Oh, no. Okay. So can everyone hear me all right and see up my screen? Okay, great. So
No, Taylor, I don't think your microphone's on. I think we're hearing you through Vijay's computer.
Taylor, you're muted.
can everyone hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
that does sound better. Yes.
I will start over then. Okay. So what I'm going to go over is just the timeline and how you are going to get your money, what you need to do and able to get it prior, when you get it, and then after you get it. So right now we are going through and understanding the state guidelines and the requirements. I will go through our expenditure spreadsheet, and line by line we can talk through that. Then we'll talk about how you are going to receive your money and when, and then additionally when you're going to report your money. So funding distribution, this is going to be the timeline and how you start obtaining your money. As Vijay has kind of already talked about this, but I'm going to walk through a little bit. So previous to today, the state and the Spark Committee set specific amounts for each county.
Now that we've issued guidance and expectations, we can now move along and start processing what you guys need in order to make the best decisions to spend this money. So as you get the county resolutions, which you've already have, we need those submitted back to us by July 13th. Those resolutions, as Vijay will go over more in depth, just promise that you understand that these funds will be spent for COVID-related expenditures and that you are responsible for making those decisions. Then 2 days later, on July 15th, is when your county's funds will be distributed. The way that these funds are going to be distributed is through an ACH debit transfer. So I've been working with the Department of Administration, Revenue, but our budget office, as well as the Treasurer's office, and we have kind of all been having conversations the best way to do this. We obtained your county's location IDs or SMART IDs from the Treasurer's office and the Department of Revenue so that we can make direct deposits into your bank accounts in the quickest way possible. So just so you know, when that deposit hits, it might take a couple days just to go through the process, but they will start on the 15th, provide 1 to 2 business days. Other than that, there's a link on this slide that you can check the status of your payment and when it went through your system. So that link will go directly to the Department of Administration's website, and where the municipality services links are, you can see that there. So after you get your money, you're going to continue to collect receipts for reimbursements for past expenditures while developing your direct aid plan, how you will use the rest of the money that you have not spent on reimbursements. That first round of reconciled receipts is going to be due August 15th, as well as your plan. So with your plan, you want to try to use all that money as best you can. The money that you don't have allocated in that plan, as Vijay went over, will then be returned to the state. As we get those plans, you will be notified prior to September 15th of how much money you will be owing the state. And then on September 15th, we will then do a recoupment of funds, which is going to be another ACH debit transaction. If you have any further questions about that, we can talk, but what I recommend about this process, and we will action further guidance later, is how are you going to use this money to help you administrate and keep track of these funds? This accounting process is going to be critical because we know that everyone's going to be wanting to know where every penny goes. So having a dedicated person to track this money and make these reports is going to be very important throughout this process. Okay, so a little bit more about your commitment to compliance and what that looks like. In the county resolution, it says a couple things. You know, it's an agreement between the state and the counties that we can trust each other to put these funds to the direct use of COVID expenditures. So also this means that you must report those expenditures in the correct way. So if you do not spend the money on an eligible expenditure, you are responsible, your county is responsible for paying that tab. We will also provide guidance, and that's what the online portal will be for, is if you have any questions about what might be eligible or what might not be eligible, there will be a sheet that you can fill out and submit to get an opinion from our office, which we will publish every opinion so that you can have an idea of what fits into that category. So I'm going to stress this a little bit more, but the reconciliation of your reports is so critical because federal audits are very likely to happen after this. So it is imperative that we keep the correct records and have a complete scope of exactly where the money went. Right now, the Department of Treasury guidance is very vague, but they did say last night that they were going to be offering more guidance soon. But in our reporting template right now, it covers all the bases of any general compliance or federal audit. so that we can cover our bases and not have to backtrack at any time. So after this webinar concludes, we are going to send a link to the county clerks. Is that correct? The county clerks, and they will designate one specific key contact for your county. This person will be the primary liaison between the recovery office and the county. And separately, this could be the same person, the primary contact, or a different person, but you will need to designate a designated person to sign all documents, a designated person to sign each report that you submit, each resolution. This will be the last person to see these reports and these reconciliations, so it's very important to make sure this person will be around and be involved in these processes. So we will get that form out to you here soon. The last thing I have here is the report deadline. And something about this is we allowed you 15 days prior to when the report is due to reconcile the reports. So after this, I'm going to go through the template for how you're going to record those reimbursements and then soon to be your direct aid spending. But as you can see here, the first date, August 15th, the reporting period for which those receipts will be is when you first started spending, March 1st to July 31st. So you have those 15 days because the county is going to be responsible for reconciling not only your expenditures, but expenditures of municipalities. So we will also provide you with a template for localities and municipalities to use to record their own, because they will be responsible for their own compliance and reporting. But they then must submit those reports to you to compile all in one comprehensive document by the 15th. These templates are exactly the same, so all it should be is just a copy and paste into a larger Excel sheet that you can submit then onto our office. So as we go through here, something that, as we discussed earlier with the Kansas Association of Counties, was some of these reporting deadlines may end on a weekend. So if that's true, we'll follow through to the next business day and you'll have that grace period to submit it on a Monday. So no worries about that. But I also want to touch on, before we get to the expenditure spreadsheet that was also mentioned by KAC, is we would love to have a finance seminar whenever you get a point person, whether that's a person you hire or whether it's a person within your county that will be doing all of the reporting. We can then go more into the weeds and do a step-by-step process of what each form looks like, what each field looks like, and answer any further questions then. And we can do that within the next couple weeks or so. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the expenditure spreadsheet. Okay, one. Okay. Can you see it?
It's not showing up. I would stop sharing and share again.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna share again here. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So this is going to be the template we provide to each county and how they will report. So first here we have a summary page that goes over what the template does, what's within the template, what each tab means, and then your further reporting guidance. This page will be filled out by that designated signer that you will appoint today. And it will be their responsibility to submit these on time. So as we go through this, a brief overview is the tabs at the bottom here are what are the different fields in which you're going to be keeping different expenditures. So I will go through those more specifically. On the right-hand side, we have the reporting timeline, which we already spoke of. Just to reiterate that the state's final deadline to spend funds is up to December 30th, and then the state itself must return those funds to the federal government. The last and final reporting period will be on February 1st, so that you guys have a little bit more time to reconcile all of your reports and make sure that you are able to get the municipalities' input as well for that final 5th report. So as just a disclaimer, we will be tracking what the federal guidance is due to reporting, but at this moment, this is the current timeline, but it is subject to change. As we go down here on the summary page, it's just pretty simple. You're going to fill out your county, contact name, bank ID, and tax ID, and then you're going to do a county expenditure summary, which you will get those numbers from the following tabs. Lastly, your designated signer will fill out the bottom part and sign. Going further, we have a description of what each of the fields in the next tabs mean so that you all can have a precise knowledge of what we are asking for. So I'm going to describe them as we go on the spreadsheet so we can have a better idea of what we're looking at. So this is the reimbursement receipts. This tab will be for reimbursements, but also for your direct aid expenditures. So the first thing that you will do before you enter in any expenditure will be selecting whether it's a reimbursement or if it's a direct expenditure from the CRF fund. So as of now, if we get you guys this spreadsheet next week, you can start filling out your reimbursement requests, but you will have no direct expenditures from CRF because you do not have the CRF funds. Then we'll do date issued, payment amount, payment method, which could be ACH, check, credit card, wire transfer, the voucher invoice, who approved it, and the process in which it was approved, the check number or advice number that from the transfer, and then expenditure category and expenditure subcategory are going to be a really great resource for not only us, but for your guys' at the county level to see at the end of each report how much money was spent where. Here are some example categories that will be revised when you get the final report, but we have things such as food distribution, labor, medical care supplies, National Guard. So out of those, what you can do with this data is we can then put it into a pie chart or sort it in different ways to see where this money is going, and then we can help further plan what might need extra support after. And the rest of this spreadsheet is just stating who is the money going to, what is their tax ID, the point of contact's email, and then let's say that the entity receiving the money is not the full recipient of that fund. So for example, if a county bought a bunch of laptops from Dell for schools, so the receiving entity is going to be Dell, and you'll use Dell's tax ID, but the service recipient will be the school that you are providing it to. And then we also have a comments column. And I know this is a lot, and no one needs to memorize any of these things right now. We'll talk about it further on the finance call, but each of these tab fields have descriptions as well to clarify any confusion. So this is where all of your reimbursements and direct aid spending will go. Each expenditure will have its own line item. No matter if you have a reoccurring cost every month, you will have to line item that every month. The last tab we have here will be transfers to municipalities. So this tab is where you will explicitly write out how much money you've given to local units of government and which local unit of government that went to. This will also help you track when you need to get your reports back from those local units of government, where they went and who to contact to get them back in time to compile them. And I know that was a lot of information we just went over, and you guys will be receiving this reporting template with early next week. There's just a few things that we need to clean up and based off of the federal guidance, and then you will have this in your inboxes. Also, I would like to note that since we are putting the requirement that the local units of government do have to do their own reporting, there will be an exact template like this, but geared towards municipalities that you will also receive so you can distribute to whoever you end up giving money to. And I'm sure there's a bunch of questions, so I can go through and try to answer those later. But this is what I have now, and I think I'm going to pass it back to Vijay to talk about the resolution.
Stop sharing this.
Mm-hmm. I got it.
Hopefully everyone can see my screen. What I'm going to do is go through the resolution that we provided to counties. All counties should have a copy of this resolution already. If not, please let us know as soon as possible. We'd like Taylor mentioned, we're requiring that these resolutions be submitted to us before funds are going to be provided to your county. So it's very important that you all have this resolution and that you have some time to ask specific questions. If you have any sort of legal questions after reviewing it with your county counselors. I know that the Kansas Association of County has provided us a list of questions as it relates to this resolution. Specifically, what does this mean or what does that mean? I can go through all of the ones that I can answer specifically today. Some of the questions that were provided to us are guidance interpretation questions. And what I mean by that is they are questions saying, I have this type of expense, or I have this specific person that worked overtime for COVID-19. Is that an allowable expense? Those, I would encourage people to use the guidance interpretation form, and some of the questions that we've already gotten, we'll try to post as quickly as possible. I will say that for the major source of questions, it has been related to payroll and what sorts of payroll expenses are allowed or not allowed under the CARES Act. The June 24th update of the Treasury guidance does include additional information about what expenditures are allowed and not allowed in terms of payroll. So I would ask that you go through that guidance first, and if there are any additional questions, please let us know and we can provide a determination. The first part of the resolution are whereas clauses underlining the specific moment that we are in with COVID-19, the importance of making specific health-related or economic investments in counties and the state, and a background of how we got to this situation in terms of when a disaster declaration was determined by the federal government, when the Spark Committee was established by the governor, and specific information about what county is implementing this resolution and so forth. The whereas clauses are the only place in which counties can edit language. We are indicating that any specific section past the whereas clauses have to be signed as is. And if there is a specific legal issue that your county counselor would like to discuss with us, please let us know through the recovery office email as soon as possible. But we are indicating that only the whereas clauses can be edited. So I won't go through the whereas clauses. There's a lot of insert county here and insert authorizing body here. I had a question about what does it mean when we say insert granting local ordinance? I just mean what is the specific local ordinance that allows that body to sign this resolution or speak on behalf of the county or act on behalf of the county. We used this specific terminology when we had the disaster declarations, and we cited the specific statute that allowed the governor to make a disaster declaration. So similarly, what allows your county commission or so forth to sign this on behalf of the county. Section 1 is very specifically taken from the CARES Act itself. It outlines, as it is outlined in the toolkit and as it is outlined in the guidance, what you can and cannot use funds for in terms of the CARES Act, necessary expenditures incurred due to a public health emergency, and not accounted for in the budget. And I think that's very clear in all of the guidance that it cannot be accounted for in the budget that is most recently approved for the county as of March 27th, 2020. Sections 2 and 3 are just examples. I think there were a lot of questions and confusion related to, do these mean that I can only spend on the things that are listed here? The answer is no. You can spend on anything that is allowable under the CARES Act. We just provided some examples of what is allowed and not allowed from the federal guidance to give whoever is reading this document an idea of what the government is allowing or not allowing when they've provided the state and thus the counties these funds. Section 2 is explaining examples of what you can spend the money on, and Section 3 is explaining what you can't spend the money on. I know that there are very specific questions that you all have in terms of what do some of these terms mean? The government payroll support program, for example. We are not going to go through all of those today. I want you to know that we have those questions and that we will provide these in the form of an FAQ to you so you have our determination and answer as to what these specific items mean. Section 4 is a reiteration of what it was outlined in Section 1, that coronavirus relief funds may not be used to directly account for revenue shortfalls related to the COVID-19 outbreak. I want to be very clear about that in terms of when you are doing your reimbursements, but also when you are doing your direct spending plan. And again, I know there are going to be very specific questions as to, is this allowed or is that allowed? Again, we've set up the process and we'd like you all to submit questions there and continually check the website as we post, because your question might be answered in a previous iteration of guidance. The next section, which I know there are specific questions on, and I'll try to go through all of the ones that I have in front of me right now, basically outlines all of the reporting requirements that Taylor specifically went through earlier with you. So on August 15th, counties will provide the first reconciliation of funds. That means anything that you want to have reimbursed to the state that is within the reporting period allowed by the federal government, any sort of reimbursable expenses need to be included, and any sort of additional receipts or things that you have spent that you are crediting towards the money that you've been given by the state. And the second thing is providing a plan for any additional funds that weren't used for reimbursement. Like I mentioned earlier, if you only have $100,000 in reimbursements, when you pull together all of the cities and schools and your county, 900,000 of that, the remaining 900,000 needs to be all accounted for through a direct aid spending plan, and we'll provide you that template. I want to be very clear and specific about what it means after you submit your direct aid spending plan. Once you submit that plan to the state, the Spark Task Force and the Recovery Office, their role is to go through that plan and again, do two things. One, make sure that all of the expenditures are eligible, and two, do a bird's eye view of what counties are spending their money on. So it is very clear to the county, to the state, here's what counties have been spending their money on. Here's maybe what the state needs to be focused on for rounds 2 and 3. And again, I know there was a question about that. Round 1 is the only thing that counties need to be worried about right now. Rounds 2 and 3 are going to be at the state level. Public and private entities, including counties, may receive additional funds through rounds 2 and 3, or will be able to apply for funds through rounds 2 and 3. But in terms of accounting and spending and a direct aid spending plan, you just need to worry about round 1. So once you have specifically gotten a notice from our office after you've submitted your direct aid spending plan saying either yes, everything looks good, or no, there needs to be some changes, you will have some time to reallocate funds. Let's say one of the programs is ineligible. We'll give you some time to reallocate funds, and we will provide multiple notices of how much money we plan on taking out of the accounts that is required for recoupment. So let's say you, after doing all of your changes, you still have $50,000 that can't be accounted for. That will be taken from the accounts on September 15th. So we just want to be very clear that we will provide you multiple notices and you will have a chance to reallocate as needed. Those recouped funds will then go back into the pot for maybe a county had a lot of additional reimbursement requests. There's a large outbreak in a county and there's a need for additional allocations. We will ensure that that money goes back to either round 2 and round 3 funding or to back to counties, all the funds that are recouped. On September 15th, along with the recoupment, if needed, you will be providing the second reconciliation of funds, any additional receipts to be reimbursed. And then again on November 1st, again on December 1st. And I think we want to be very clear here that the Spark Committee decided that the final reconciliation of funds will be allowed on February 1st, 2021, to give you all enough time to get all of the receipts together, all of this expenditures together. That is subject to federal guidance. So if the federal government comes back and tells us, no, we need to have all of our books closed by December 30th, then we need to make sure that we have all of our accounts and receipts and our final expenditures back by December 30th. So right now there's a lot more flexibility, but we will update you as soon as we know from the federal government if that needs to be an earlier deadline. There was a question about if there's any funds unspent by December 30th, is that lost to the county? Yes, any funds unspent by December 30th, as of now, because we do not know yet if you can encumber those funds beyond December 30th, we are operating under the assumption that those funds will be lost to both the county and the state. So if we get additional flexibility from the federal government that says, hey, it's okay for you to keep spending money beyond December 30th as long as you've got it budgeted, then we will provide that guidance for you and you'll have the same expectation that we do. Section 6 is specific to transparency and accountability. I think that there's been a lot of specific questions related to what it means when I'm doing open meetings and things like that. I will say the rule of thumb is if your county is making a final decision or expenditure on CRF related funds through an open meeting, as you would do any other county commission meeting or anything like that, all we are certifying here that is made clear and available to the public, that the public understands what is being voted on, what expenditures are being made at the county level, and how those decisions were made. So just like the Spark Committee is all public and available to everybody, we want to be clear that any sorts of final determinations, any sorts of expenditures, all of that is made available to the public. When it says in conjunction with Spark Task Force and the Office of Recovery, what we were trying to relay there is that the same requirements that we are putting for you to be transparent and accountable at the county level, we are going to be following at the state level. Section B says any meeting materials. So any presentations, agendas that are associated with the expenditure of CRF funds need to be publicly accessible. And again, if you have any specific questions related to what this means, I would say look at your existing processes and how you do open meetings within your own county. We're not going to be incredibly prescriptive here. I just want to be clear that throughout your own county process, if there are deliberations that you are making on this funding, as you would do with any sorts of other funding that you would do with the county process, that is made available to the public, nothing specifically prescriptive. Part C, when we say make accessible a detailed and timely accounting of CRF spending, including financial reconciliation materials, the form that Taylor presented earlier, we've coded it so that it'll automatically generate totals for you, automatically generate charts for you, automatically be able to illustrate what you've spent the money on after you've submitted all of your reconciliation. So all we ask is that whatever you're submitting to the state for your reconciliations, that you put on your website. Part D and E are specific to, we want you to create a process in which people can provide, just like we have provided, questions, submission requests for new programs, so a grant proposal type process, if that makes sense for your county. Just, again, not being prescriptive, just a way to make sure the public can engage with the process of how spending decisions are made. When we give you the direct aid spending template, we'll also give you a sample grant application form that you can then post for a grant application process for the funding, if that's helpful to you. Next, there's the specific section 7, I think there's been a lot of questions about, and so I'll go through this as clearly as I can. Our expectation to counties when they sign this specific resolution is that you create a process, and we've provided you the tools to do so, to collect the reimbursements for COVID-19 related expenses for cities, for towns, for public educational and municipal entities at large within your county, and provide reasonable consideration of flexible direct aid spending requests. What that means is you have to ensure that if a city has a reimbursable expense, that is accounted for, but you need to provide reasonable consideration if a city says, hey, I want to do this public-private partnership with my local chamber of commerce. You need to develop a process to provide reasonable consideration of that request. So what that means is you need to have maybe a grant proposal form that they can fill out and say, this is the thing that we're thinking, and then have reasonable consideration at the county level for that program idea. And again, we'll provide you in the coming weeks a sample form that you can use to do so. The other thing that we've gotten a lot of questions on is related to this Part A, related to if a public educational or municipal entity has locations in more than one county, that entity should be treated as located in the county in which the entity's principal office or headquarters is located. I don't want to get into specifics on this call because it is at the top of our list in terms of providing you specific guidance. I know we've gotten questions ranging from, does this mean that for some community colleges, for example, the place where the headquarters is in is not necessarily the best thing to use because there's multiple campuses? Or for specific institutions, the headquarters may be in a certain county, but a really large flagship building may be in a different county. I will say on the outset that just because that one county is responsible doesn't mean that that's the only county that can provide funds to that school district, or the only county that can provide funds to that community college. So for example, if there are schools in multiple counties, it doesn't mean that only the county that the headquarters is in can provide, is the only person that can provide funds to that school district. They can share and partner with other counties to provide funds to that school district with the other counties that have schools within their county. It's just when you look at who is responsible, it is based on the headquarters. And again, I will say, we will review this with our legal team because there may be instances in which this is not specifically related or the best course of action for specific types of institutions. So we'll provide you final guidance on this so everybody has one thing to look at. And I know there's a lot of questions on that, but I want to be very clear. Part 8, there's been questions about what does it mean to consider and incorporate and address disproportionate impacts on racial minorities. What I will say is that there will be a section in the direct aid plan that just illustrates, talk about how you've considered this question. So in some counties, there aren't very many families that are racial minorities in that county. We just want you to explain the thought process for why that consideration was made or not made. So for example, you could say in that section, we instituted a specific program specifically for minority-owned businesses, for example. We just want all counties to signify that they've thought through this and that they've incorporated it in some way or considered it in their direct aid plan. Again, there's no prescription here of what you have to do. It is just illustrating to the state that you've kind of thought through this depending on the specific issues within your county. Finally, I will talk about, I think, the major topic here, which is responsibility for funds. Just like the state is responsible for all funds provided to the state, this resolution signifies that if you are providing a transfer to a county, to a city, for example, that the final responsibility does lie at the county level. You can, for example, require cities within your county or other institutions within your county to sign the same resolution so that they are responsible and accountable for their funds. But the specific thing that this says is you are responsible for any ineligible expenditures made at the county level. That includes transfers made or specific programs that you are implementing. Our current understanding is that only the state will be audited for these funds. That other than Johnson and Sedgwick County, where the federal government came in and gave them money directly, that for all of the other funds, the state will be responsible. So if you are not Johnson and Sedgwick County, at this time, we do not expect that you will have the federal government directly auditing you. Now, that could change. That could be clarified in further guidance, and we will let you know as soon as that's possible. That could even change with a new presidential administration if that could occur, if that occurs in November. So we have to be incredibly flexible about that. But again, our current understanding is that the state is on the hook for funds, all of those that are not provided specifically to Johnson and Sedgwick because they got those from the federal government. So this resolution is a partnership. It is knowing that the state is going to be accountable. It is a partnership with counties that we will come to you and expect you all to be very specific in your accounting, and we will come to you all if there are any ineligible expenditures done at the county level with the transfers that we have made to you. So I want to make that very clear on the outset. And I know there's going to be a lot of questions, and I know there's going to be a lot of difficulties with making sure all of that is done. I want to say two things. One is we will continue to provide you with the tools to make it easy for you to collect reimbursement requests, collect expenditures, and plan everything out. And two, you can and should consider hiring an additional position for accounting, hiring an outside compliance firm for accounting, or any other specific administrative measures that may make it helpful to account for the large portions of funding that are coming into your county. And we want to make that very clear. And go ahead, Taylor.
So really quick, as we're wrapping up here, the reason we are encouraging you all to hire administrative people to help with the accounting portion is because you have the hardest job, but you are the best people to do it, to find out what your county needs and where that money should go. And I don't want you all to have to worry about getting the expenditures right, reconciling the report, making sure the ledger is appropriate and is turned in on time, and reaching out to those municipalities that haven't got you the report. That's not a part of what your job is to do here. And by asking for help in this really critical portion of all of this CARES Act funding, this is where we get hurt the most if we do it incorrectly, and you get hurt the most if we don't report correctly. And if we do, the data and the way that we can analyze this and provide it to you, and so that you can take it back to your constituents and say, this is what we spent the money on, will best help everyone to understand the direct effects that this money had on their counties. Additionally, next week we are planning to provide some guidance on what those administrative offices might look like, what positions we would recommend, and the funding for those. So we'll have more information by then.
Thanks, Taylor. The last thing that I will say on this specific resolution is that I know that the biggest source of heartburn is going to be the share, allocate, account, and recoup funds for local units of government or for educational institutions. We will continue to provide tools and webinars and additional supports for you, but I think the reporting that Taylor went through earlier is going to be the best tool to ensure that all of that is done in a compliant way. And we will edit those and continue to provide additional guidance as we get more guidance from the federal government. Shelby mentioned this earlier, and I want to be very clear, is that we are continually getting additional evolving guidance. And so we want to be very clear about that. And as soon as we get that, we will provide that to you and let you know how that changes, how you all need to interact with all of these reporting structures. So I know that we're almost at the end here. I want to go through one last piece of this before we end, and I appreciate everyone's patience. I know there's a lot of things that we're going through here. As you start thinking about the next couple of months and looking at your direct spending plan, or looking at what sorts of investments that you want to make with your county, we want to provide you as much guidance as possible. So what we've done is we've brainstormed with our state agencies, with folks on the Spark committee, with the governor, and with other folks, and we've provided what we're just calling a county prioritization roadmap. So a sample framework on how you can basically plan out your direct aid spending plan. So we want folks to start with making public institutions whole. So start with making sure that all the institutions within your county and your county itself have the reimbursements they need for COVID-related expenses. Then we want folks to jump into starting to think about what are the specific health-related investments that are needed right now and to provide for the fall. Next, we want folks to start thinking about how do I ensure that businesses and nonprofits and other institutions that have been hit hard by COVID-19 can continue to stay open, but also reopen safely, and providing them the resources for that. And finally, the last part of the roadmap is building resilient communities, which is what are those future forward investments that are needed in childcare, social services, in technology infrastructure that can not only benefit you during times of COVID, but also beyond. So how do we leverage these funds for long-term development in your communities? All of these investments can be made along the 4 state investment priorities or themes of health, connectivity, economic development, and education. And the next slide will be a little bit more specific about different investment ideas. But the Spark committee, when we're making our investments, these are the types of investments that we're going to make. And so we're recommending those same sorts of investments to you along that roadmap that I just mentioned. This slide, which you all can go through in much more detail after we provide this toolkit to you, basically lays out that roadmap and gives you example ideas for investment along all of those different key milestones. So in terms of health, connectivity, economic development, and education, what are the different investments that you can make along the roadmap? So start with reimbursements. Next, you move on to protecting the health of Kansans. So what are the sorts of medical supplies investments that you can make, maybe county jail grants, telehealth investments for connectivity? What are the community and economic developments investments that you can make? Grants to senior care centers, evictions and rent assistance. Finally, what are the educational related investments that you can make? For example, school-based mental health or safety and health supplies for schools, just outlining a lot of these ideas. Next, how can you, again, on these same health, connectivity, economic development, education, investment areas, ensure that businesses and nonprofits can reopen safely, giving you some ideas there. So, for example, if you want to provide grants for remote work improvements for businesses in your county, or you want to provide grants for nonprofits and businesses for operating expenditures related to required closures. And again, that can be required closures by the governor or by the county level, and that's allowed within the guidance. Worker support and hazard pay programs or grants to childcare providers is a really big one that we think is a good investment opportunity. Finally, building resilient communities. What are the future forward investments that you need to be thinking about in terms of health, connectivity, economic development, and education? So vaccine deployment investments, broadband investments to ensure connectivity. And again, this is a partnership between the local governments and the state. So the state will also be making investments in these areas. And so both of them will partner with each other and work off of each other. And again, childcare related investments for essential workers, school infrastructure improvements, school lunch improvements, all of those different investment ideas and opportunities that I think you can start thinking about now, and will provide you additional resources and tools coming down the line. I want to say very specifically, I know that there's a lot on this slide and it's not kind of very specific and broken down. Our idea is that this will be a template for you all to start planning at the county level. But in the coming weeks, we will have our agencies come on these webinars. We will have additional resources to you of very specific detailed programs around things like childcare, around things like corrections related investments, around things like small business investments that you can make that are eligible in the CARES Act, and you can kind of copy and paste to your county. But this is a framework for you to start thinking about how to plan out the next couple of months. And again, this is the first of many different iterations. Immediate next steps. And again, I'm close to being done here. I know you've heard a lot of my voice so far. Next steps are first to review the content and forms, and we'll provide you that reimbursement form early next week. We will provide you an email right now after we kind of finish up this webinar for you to submit your primary point of contact, like Taylor mentioned. We'd like you to submit that primary point of contact by July 6th. Next, we want you to start thinking about how to best start collecting reimbursements for counties and public and municipal entities within your county. So once you get that reporting spreadsheet next week, you can start itemizing all of your reimbursements. We also want you to start asking questions and making sure that you have your county resolution all together by the 13th. Next, we want you to start developing a process for locals to consider proposals for new programs from cities, businesses, et cetera. So basically, what's the process that you'll use to develop your direct spending plan? And again, we'll give you additional resources on that in the coming weeks. And finally, we want to highlight that the next webinar will be the week of July 6th. That will include the direct aid spending plan template, along with additional insights for investment ideas. And we will be providing a webinar to your finance contact to go through the reimbursement spreadsheet in a little bit more detail and answer questions there. I know this is a lot of information. I know there'll be a lot of questions, but we wanted to run through all of it and make sure that you all have a good understanding of where we're coming from, what guidance we have, and additionally, what this partnership will look like over the next couple of months. Appendix A goes through every single area that is allowed by the federal government and gives examples of what is allowed and not is allowed as we know it right now. So medical expenses, what are examples the federal government provides? Public health expenses, what are specific examples the federal government provides as eligible expenditures, and so on. For payroll, for action to facilitate health measures, for economic supports, and for the FEMA cost share portion. And then finally, what are ineligible expenditures? Again, you will have time once you get this toolkit to go through all of these. And again, these are just examples. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is what the federal government says we can spend the money on. And their additional guidance adds some color to these of what they mean by all of these different expenditures. Appendix B provides just a few examples of different programs in different states. So Richland County, South Carolina, for example, created a $1 million pandemic relief grant program. Chester County created the Main Street Preservation Program. Again, just examples of programs that you can start thinking about. Finally, we have all of the county allocations listed out here. So if you don't know how much your county is getting from the CARES Act, You can go through here from the round one allocation, excuse me, how much money your county is getting. You can go through here and look at what your county is getting. And again, we've talked about that before through the email that we've sent out and other sources. I will stop on the next step slide here. That is all of the information that I have to provide you all today. I want to again thank everybody for their time, and I'll turn it over to Bruce here in a second. Again, we just want to reiterate that we know this is an incredibly difficult and stressful process, just adding on to the stress that you all at the county level have felt because of COVID-19 and all of the economic and health impacts. And that our job and our commitment to you is that we will provide you the tools, ideas, guidance necessary to help create a partnership to work through the next couple of months and ensure that you all have what you need to invest in the areas that are necessary for your communities to thrive, and also that we provide you all of the information at the state level of what investments we're making so that we can ensure that there's a coordinated and accountable process that we will be in a good place for when we receive a federal audit for any other reporting requirements. So I want to thank Bruce. I want to thank everybody on the team here, and we will definitely you'll definitely be seeing more of our faces soon. So I appreciate your time, and I'll turn it over to you, Bruce.
All righty, folks. Well, thank you again, Vijay and Taylor and Shelby. You guys are just knocking this thing out of the park. I know you've had a very short period of time to create a huge program with $400 million to disseminate to 105 counties, and that is no small task, and you are stepping up to it. I know. So with that said, folks, I'm not going to hold you any longer. It's 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. It's gorgeous outside, but just know that more information is to come. I've been reading everything that's in the chat boxes, and it looks like most of the questions have been answered. We will be saving the chat. We will be cleaning it up, and then we will be posting that to the webpage because that is there's some questions in there that you might want to go back to and refer to. All of this information, as I said, will be posted on the COVID-19 website, as well as we have created a link on our KAC website to your guys' website. So if you want to remember kansascounties.org, you can go there, and Kim Qualls has already linked our website to you guys. So you'll be able to go either directly to their site or through us to them. So either way. But with that, we had 466 people on board today. So that tells you just how important and how meaningful this work is that you guys are doing. So thank you again very, very much. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye to you all. Have a great, safe weekend and enjoy yourself. And I look forward to seeing you in the next couple of weeks as we continue to do these webinars and provide needed, valuable information to this project and this program. So with that, take care, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.